Chapter 11. Drown. Black energy cyclones encircle Jake's body like a deadly hurricane. The ground shakes, breaking the tunnels apart. Above, the streets split open and massive sinkholes spread outward. Like a raging fire, the energy spreads through the tunnels and consumes all. The remaining acolytes of Hui barely manage to utter screams before their forms vanish within the black energy. Those revenants that have not already escaped to the city above are not immune to Jake's out-of-control power, and they too are destroyed. Hui is pushed backwards, shielding his face from the brutal gale. Straining to hold his ground, the Sicarii is surprised by the ever-increasing energy output. Remembering Ymura's past strength to be slightly below his own, Hui cannot fathom how his rival's power now dwarfs his. Hui has gained tremendous strength from the devotion of his acolytes, and is far more powerful now than when he was in his own body. The Sicarii wonders how Ymura has managed to grow so powerful just from his union to one human boy. Jake screams in anguish. His every thought is torturous grief. The darkness continues to pour out of him in flames, singeing his flesh with searing heat. Even as each burn is inflicted, the tremendous power immediately heals his wounds with an evaporating mist. The ceiling collapses around them, bringing down the last of the tunnels, and fully exposing the streets above. Claire's body is lost beneath the rubble, and Jake cries out even louder, his energy shooting upward like a fiery volcanic explosion. Moonlight shines down, distorted by the waves of the black energy pulsating from the teen. Storm clouds materialize from seemingly nowhere, and lightning flashes all around. Hard rains spill down upon them, and an inhuman growl rises from Jake that causes Hui to stumble backwards in fear. The teen's aura briefly takes the form of a massive red-eyed dragon of dancing flames. Separate from the pain, hatred also grows within Jake. Manifesting as a second layer of aura, this red energy swirls together with the black, and flashes like two armies colliding with 1,000 swords each. The sky takes on a crimson glow as Jake's hatred spreads out into the air in thick waves. The buildings nearest Jake burst into flames, burning to the ground quickly as they're ravaged by the inhuman power. The streets are emptied of life by the revenants, and no one is around to bear witness to Jake's power apart from Hui and a pair of fallen angelic observers on a rooftop nearby. Is that really Jake Stewart causing this disturbance? Gadriel asks with surprise. Ahead of them, several geysers of flame explode from the cracked street and spray upwards into the air. Cedrion grins widely. I told you he was something special. The Grigori could not be prouder of the youth. I expected him to have his hands full with Hui and his followers, but I did not think things would escalate this much. Should we intervene? Gadriel asks, hand on the hilt of his sword. Cedrion holds up a hand. Not just yet. I would like to observe what happens next. This outburst could vastly speed up our plans for the boy. Several blocks away, the mysterious demon-hunting duo of Alyssa and Bernard sense the dark energy spiking from below the city. Making their way through the residential areas of the city, they hunt any of the remaining revenants that evacuated the tunnels below. Unknown to them, the creatures have fled above ground to escape Jake's fearsome power. Bernard leaps up, slashing down through the back of a humanoid revenant as it flees, never looking back to acknowledge its pursuers. Bernard finds it strange that the revenants are so preoccupied with running away that they're not even fighting back. What is this horrible aura that I feel? Alyssa whispers, clutching her chest. It is not another revenant, Bernard says, flinging black fluid from his enchanted sword before sheathing it. And it is far too powerful to be any creature that we know outside of a true devil. I have not felt such hatred and malice in the world before, Alyssa whispers, her hand shaking. This force is like unbridled negative emotion. We should rejoin the others before attempting to investigate, Bernard warns. We do not know what the source of this power is, and we need more information before acting. Alyssa scoffs, seeing little use of their continued partnership with the government agents. There is nothing they could tell us that we would not discover with our very own eyes. Bernard ignores her, contacting Agent Callahan. The remaining revenants have fled from us. Something has driven them away in fear. If the source is what's scaring the monsters has anything to do with the strange weather phenomena, I'm not sure I want to know what's behind it, Callahan says. I mean, what's so bad that creatures like revenants are running away from it? It is a person, Alyssa whispers. She has blocked out all other distractions, focusing only on the source of the energy. A human is causing this? Bernard asks, confused. Is that even possible? Alyssa has no answer for him. For both of them, this is unprecedented. I've seen something like this before, Agent Ross says. In Totikahatchee. I was a first responder during that crisis. I saw the same black fire and spontaneous explosions throughout the city then. When the Sakari siblings battled it out? Agent Lachey asks. Yeah, Ross whispers. It was a war zone on the ground. There were hundreds of injured in makeshift Red Cross tents. We were still pulling bodies out of the rubble for 3 weeks. Yamura, Callahan whispers. He must be engaging another powerful opponent in battle. If that's the case, this whole city is in danger of being destroyed, Lachey says. We have to do something. What could we possibly do? Ross asks. We couldn't even keep the mutated hospital staff down for good. If we don't begin evacuating the city, thousands are going to be killed just like in Totikahatchee. Do you want to relive that day again? Lachey asks. Ross shakes her head. Never. Brian begins to come to, awakening on a makeshift cot in a run-down apartment. He looks around confused. Where am I? Who are you people? He asks, seeing several PIA agents, also in the room, monitoring their communication devices. We're the good guys, Callahan says. You're unconscious and being experimented on. Brian tries to remember what happened, but his head only begins to hurt. I still feel weak. Do you know what they were doing to me? Silva speaks up. The doctor had me drawing a lot of blood from you. It's understandable that you'd be heavily fatigued. You were working for him? Brian says. Why are you here? Dr. Silva's expertise will be a valuable asset to our country. He'll also be the best option for making sure that you have a full and prompt recovery, Callahan says. Brian begins to stand, ignoring the agent's caution. I have to let my friends know that I'm okay. I bet they're looking for me. There was some fighting outside the hospital when we infiltrated. That might have been them engaging the GX-enhanced mercenaries employed to defend the facility. There were a few that were much stronger than the hospital staff that we encountered. You didn't stick around to see who won? Were you not there to stop the doctor? Brian asks. Our job was to eliminate the doctor and shut down his operations. During the mission, I determined that the property we secured from the hospital was more important, so we extracted. What, you want my blood too? Brian growls. Is that why you saved me? Look, kid, we aren't the bad guys. The doctor was making you his own personal parasite milk cow. Would you rather had us leave you there? Lachey asks, annoyed. What would it change? You brought the psycho doing the experimenting along with you. In order for us to properly combat the threats posed by parasitically enhanced fighters, we must understand the parasite itself. Dr. Silva will be able to assist us in that regard. This is no different from the Nazi scientists being rescued from the war, even though they were guilty of horrendous crimes, Brian growls. I think you're overreaching a bit, Callahan says. Silva was also right there in Clavemont when Khan was abducting the townspeople and turning them into monsters. Silva was also present at the hospital when the doctor was turning people into monsters. At what point do you stop considering his involvement a coincidence? Ross speaks up. The kid is right. We should have killed Silva on the spot. He's wily. I don't trust him at all. We don't have to trust him to need him. No one that will work with us has a better understanding of the GX parasite or Khan in the doctor's operations, Callahan says. While he's with us, the doc is under my watch, Ross says. I won't let him go anywhere without myself present. She glares at Silva. Brian walks over to them, still groggy but otherwise recovered. His senses are overwhelmed by the surge of Jake's raging energy. I'll head over to the epicenter of the destruction. None of you can survive against Yamura. He hesitates, nervous. I'm not sure that I can either. But I stand a better chance than any of you. We'll get in touch with the authorities and try to mobilize some kind of evacuation procedure. We may not be able to stop the destruction, but we can at least do our damnedest to prevent the loss of civilian lives. If I can find my friends, together we stand a better chance at taking him down, Brian says. Do you even know where to find them? Callahan asks. Brian nods. We had a rallying point in town. I'm sure they'll have returned there before leaving the city. I'll start there. Don't do anything stupid, kid, Callahan says, patting Brian's shoulder. He hands the teen a burner phone. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. Thanks for all your help. If you hadn't forced me to leave the hospital, I would have jumped right into battle again for sure and probably gotten myself killed, Brian says. Sometimes I need to be saved from myself. You have a good heart, kid. Heroic nature can be very dangerous to your health. Brian runs towards the door. Don't turn your back on him, he says, looking over at Silva. He's not to be trusted. Silva puts his hands out to the sides, trying to feign innocence. I don't know why everyone dislikes me so much. Lachey shoves the scientist into another room. You just have one of those faces. Come on, you're going to help me find some evacuation transports. Silva laughs. Well, if this doesn't bring back memories. The agent eyes the man with suspicion. What's that supposed to mean? Oh, nothing, Silva laughs. Deja vu, I suppose. Hui looks on in horror at the display of sheer destructive power generated by the human boy. Jake's screams are primal, echoing throughout the few remaining tunnels that have yet to collapse. All this energy is coming from Yamura's host, not Yamura himself, Hui thinks in fear. I sense no Sakari energy from him whatsoever. This cannot be happening. I knew that I would have to contend with Yamura as soon as I gained a host, but I never imagined that it would be his vessel that posed the greater threat. All of the buildings above ground shake violently as tremors radiate throughout the city. Those structures atop the ancient caverns collapse as the ground begins to cave in. Pillars of flame rise up from the sinkholes, generated by the teen's out-of-control energy. As the sanctuary itself becomes ground zero for the cave-ins, Hui rushes to get up to the surface. The Sakari leaps from slabs of falling concrete and pavement in an attempt to reach safety and prevent himself from being entombed underground forever. Finally arriving at the street, Hui is shocked to see the devastation Jake's energy has had on the surrounding area. There are fires everywhere, and most of the buildings are nothing but rubble for several blocks. I should probably kill the boy now while he is too consumed by his emotions to know what is happening, Hui thinks. But I am afraid that if I make any move against him, the boy will come to his senses and focus his rage on me. I am much stronger than I have ever been, but I am not sure that I could defeat Ymura's host at his current level. To think, after all these millennia, there are still humans with that kind of strength. I had always believed that Enkidu was an anomaly, but perhaps humans have a greater potential than I ever suspected. Jake again screams, his power rippling through the delicate fabric between realities. Briefly, Hui catches sight of the astral realm beyond, and the horrors lying in wait. The teenager's skin is on fire, yet he does not burn. The flames flicker across his body, stroming in rhythm with the pulsation of red and black energy. Because of his connection to the astral realm, after his brief time separated from his body, Jake's unconscious is able to reach across the veil and touch the world of the undead. Scores of revenants react to Jake's presence, hungering for his vibrant life energy. The teen notices the creatures but ignores them and focuses only on Hui. Weaker undead attempt to approach the temporary fissure created by Jake's aura, but their bodies are wiped from existence as soon as they get too close to his energy. The stronger and more intelligent revenants hang back, cautiously observing the strange human. That was one hell of a light show, human, but you will not be able to intimidate me, Hui says. I have seen far greater displays of power by fighters eons beyond you in power. Challenging me will only be courting your own demise. Jake launches forward, the air exploding all around him and vaporizing many of the undead, just before the dimensional window behind him closes. Jake throws all of his weight into a left hook, pooling black energy into his fist at the last second. Hui tilts his head to dodge, but the shockwave explodes behind him, pushing Hui forward. Jake drives an elbow into Hui's sternum and drops his level low, pivoting and back-kicking Hui into the air. Hui's reactions are slowed, and he's unable to get any opportunity to get used to his new body. As Jake rises up to meet him, Hui throws his arms downward and releases a massive wave of energy. The blast flattens Jake against the ground, and Hui quickly lands beside him, dropping with an elbow into the teen's chest to pay him back for earlier. Jake exhales hard, spit spraying from his mouth. Hui strikes the teen with a combo of hard left and rights, till Jake is able to buck the Sicarii off him and leap to his feet. Both fighters land in a crouch, glaring at each other. You had a nice start, Hui says, but I think I'm starting to get a feel for this human body. Jake says nothing, instead firing off several pulses of black energy. Hui slaps the energy aside, but Jake rushes with a conjured black sword. As Jake goes in for a stab, Hui steps on the blade to make it scrape the ground and knees the teenager in the face. As Jake reels back, Hui hooks his arm and throws him backward. Jake flips in the air, landing and immediately pivoting in time to block with his forearm, just as Hui strikes with a punch. A shockwave vibrates out from the impact, sending a ripple through the concrete and shattering any windows in a several-mile radius that are still intact. Jake brings his conjured sword around in a slash, but Hui is able to deflect it with an energy blade of his own. The two hack at each other back and forth, each strike blocked by the other. Jake kicks Hui in the chest, knocking him to his back, and jumps at him with an overhead slash. Hui flips over his shoulder and back to his feet, evading the attack and causing Jake to only hit the ground. Hui lunges with a stab, but Jake deflects it with his sword and smacks Hui with an open palm strike before dropping his sword and punching him in the gut with his free hand. Hui falls back and Jake catches his sword, coming down on the Sicarii with a stab. Hui grinds his teeth together in pain, blocking Jake's stab with his own forearm. The teen's black sword pierces Hui's forearm and is pressed to less than an inch from his face. Hui struggles, blood dripping into his eyes. The Sicarii blinks rapidly, trying to clear his vision as Jake continues to press downward. Hui manages to kick Jake in the stomach, propelling him backward. "You have a lot of skill, kid," Hui coughs, looking at his bleeding arm. "I am really surprised that you can keep up with me without having to rely on Yamura." Again, Jake says nothing. The teen rushes Hui with a series of fast sword strikes. Hui parries, returning each of Jake's attacks with one of his own until both fighters go for a stronger blow and shatter each other's swords on impact. Hui decks Jake with a hard left, sending the teen crashing through a bus stop. Jake crawls free from the debris just as Hui runs at him with another left hook. Jake ducks, driving his right hand into Hui's gut. Hui spits up a mouthful of blood, looking down to see that Jake's hand has pierced his side with an open palm knife hand strike at an angle upwards. Jake headbutts the Sicarii, knocking him back, but Hui snaps a kick outward in order to catch Jake across the face. Both fighters are knocked back, but recover and pivot with a mirrored hook punch. Both punches connect, spinning the pair and causing them both to hit the street hard. Surprisingly, both fighters spring back to their feet and try again. This time only Jake's punch connects, and Hui is sent to his back. Jake follows Hui down to the street, driving his knees into the Sicarii's sternum. Hui coughs up a mixture of blood and saliva. Jake ignores the liquid splashing into his face and begins hammering Hui with devastating blows. Desperate, Hui knocks Jake back with a headbutt before rolling over and kicking him in the chest. Hui shakily stands, rubbing his jaw before spitting a mouthful of blood to the street. A bloody tooth clicks across the ground. "I can see now how you were able to give Queen Inyana a hard time. If I were at my full power, you may have actually been able to hit me once or twice before I could kill you." Jake growls in anger, furious at being taunted by the monster who so ruthlessly killed his friend Claire only a few minutes ago. The teen pushes off, his feet leaving a small crater behind indented into the street. Jake propels himself into Hui with a flurry of punches, forcing the Sicarii back on defense. Hui is annoyed that he's being pushed so hard by a human boy, and not even Yamura himself. Hui's old fighting senses begin to come back to him the longer they battle, allowing the Sicarii to block each of Jake's punches, before finally catching the teen with one of his own. Hui pulls his aura into the punch, hitting Jake so hard that the teen flies back through the side of a building, followed by a sonic boom. "Aginestra!" Hui shouts, firing a blast of magical fire into the building. The site explodes into flames. "Why do you not just let Yamura out of his cage? I did not wait 10,000 years to duel you, human." Jake leaps out of the flame surrounded by the black flame aura. Hui's eyes widen as the teen's energy wraps around him in the form of a black dragon. Jake screams loudly, breaking through Hui's defenses and landing a hard blow square to the jaw. Hui spins in the air several times before pushing himself off the street with a burst of energy from both hands. Jake's momentum carries him underneath Hui, who charges up a swirling ball of magical fire between his hands. "Aginestra!" Hui screams, blasting Jake back down through the street and into the tunnels. Hui drops down through the hole and looks around for the teen to finish him off. As he turns to the right, Hui is met by Jake's palm less than an inch from his face. Before Hui can react, Jake releases a burst of black energy from his hand into the Sakari's face. Hui crashes through a stone wall, bringing a large section of the tunnels down around them. Hui screams, flaring his aura out to free himself, and leaps upward out of the caverns as they quickly begin to fill with water. As soon as he is over the street, Hui's movement is halted abruptly, and he realizes in horror that Jake has grabbed him by the ankle. Jake screams, slamming the Sakari face first into the concrete. As Hui's face bounces back up, Jake lands with both feet onto his back. Hui screams out in agony as their bodies sink into the earth several feet. Hui throws an arm back, attempting to fire a pulse of energy, but Jake hooks his arm at the shoulder with one arm and strikes his pinned elbow with the other hand. Hui's arm breaks, releasing a piercing shriek of pain. Jake grabs Hui by the hair and drops a knee into his back before flipping the Sakari over and unleashing dozens of hard strikes into his exposed chest and ribs. Hui feels his bones breaking apart and his flesh being tenderized, but cannot overpower his opponent by sheer force. The rage has pushed Jake to a level of strength that exceeds Hui's own. Damn it, Hui thinks in frustration. If only I'd been able to unlock my full power from the start. I gave the boy too much time and opportunity. I should never have engaged in this battle without knowing how to properly control this body. Who would have thought Ymura's vessel would be such a formidable opponent? I may die here without ever trading a single blow with Ymura. How disgraceful an end that would be. The great Grand General Hui killed by a human child. Hui charges up a ball of Agnestra fire in his good hand and slams it against the side of Jake's face, sending the boy flying back several hundred yards. Hui crawls to his feet and screams in pain as he tries to reset his broken arm. I cannot go out like this. I have waited too long for this moment. I cannot be done in by a human, let alone a child, Hui thinks in shame. You have had your fun, boy, but the time has come for me to put you in your place. I have battled entire armies of fierce Sakari warriors. I have fought and killed mages and warlords far more skilled than you. You are nothing to me. I will not be defeated by a goddamn baby monkey. Hui throws his arms outward, releasing his energy in an invisible pressure meant to crush his foe on impact. Almatiga Strob! The energy hits Jake like a wall, but instead of crushing him, it only slides him backward. The teen pushes forward, fighting against the energy as it presses upon him. Impossible! Hui whispers through strained teeth. You cannot be stronger than me. The Sakari pushes Jake back again, but again the teen begins to slowly move forward. You, Jake growls, his face contorting due to the pressure. Killed Claire! What is the life of one human? Hui asks. She is inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. History marks great events. My rise to become ruler of this world is what will be remembered, not some meaningless human female whose own family willingly sacrificed her to me. You say I am responsible, but it was Craig's ambition, not mine, that took that girl's life. I know, Jake growls. I wasn't talking to you. The team begins to move faster, pushing against Hui's energy. Hui's eyes widen in surprise as his own feet begin to slide backwards, as his energy is overpowered. I was talking to him! Jake screams, breaking through Hui's energy and launching forward like a rocket, now that all resistance has ended. Hui has a terrible realization as Jake's fist connects with his jaw, shattering the bones on impact. He was never fighting me. That boy was battling against my vessel all along. His hatred for Craig fueled his power to surpass me. Me, the rightful king of this world. I cannot believe I have lost this child. Hui's body bounces off the street several times helplessly. Jake appears above the Sicarii, and Hui is able to meet his gaze for a moment, just before the teen releases a massive wave of black energy, point blank into him. Hui screams are drowned out as his body is driven deep into the earth. Refusing to submit to death after having worked so long to be reborn in the world, Hui explodes from the street and lands in a crouch. Hui's chest heaves up and down rapidly. The Sicarii's body and face are covered in bleeding cuts and bruises. The Grand General is barely able to remain conscious, as most of his stamina has already been burned up. Jake looks over at Hui, flame energy rising from his eyes. In an instant, the teen materializes inches from the Sicarii. Without warning, Jake grabs Hui by the throat and slams him into the ground. Hui is driven several hundred feet down into the earth. Jake leaps back, watching as more of the area is consumed by the spreading sinkhole. Red and black energy continues to flash around the teen's body. Hui crawls from the rubble, covered in blood and cradling a dislocated shoulder. I cannot fight him without becoming more used to this human body. My reaction time is far too slow to do anything about his attacks. I cannot even see him move, let alone respond in time. Once again, Jake rushes his opponent. This time the teen drives a fist deep into Hui's gut. Hui vomits up blood and saliva, feeling his organs smash up against each other. With a forceful backhand, Jake plants the Grand General face first into the concrete. The teen's heel stomps onto the center of Hui's back, driving an agonizing shriek from Hui's human lungs. Reaching down, Jake lifts Hui by the hair. Bits of broken rock cling to Hui's face amidst bleeding scratches and cuts. Hui opens his mouth to speak, but Jake immediately slams him back into the street, sinking the ground in several feet. Again, Hui tries to make a sound and moves his hand to defend, but Jake slams his face into the street again. You bastard, Jake screams. I'll make you suffer. Hui releases a pulse of energy into Jake's chest, pushing the teen back. The Sicarii scrambles back, trying to regain his composure. Blood runs steadily from his face in multiple places. He feels as though his skull has been fractured. How? How is a human this powerful? Hui wonders, looking at his hands as they tremble with fear. This is unthinkable. No human should be able to inflict this much damage to me. With the devotion of my followers, I should be like a god. Instead, this boy is running rampant over me, and I have been unable to mount a sizable offense of my own to counter. You killed her, Jake growls, shaking with rage. The black and red energy pulsates wildly. Your priest killed my uncle, and you killed Claire. I am sure there must be a way for us to come to an understanding. With powers as great as ours, why must we fight each other? We could form an alliance that could force the entire world into submission. I would never join forces with you, Jake screams, rushing Hui with a combo of hard punches. The Sicarii is rocked by the blows, unable to defend. Barely conscious, Hui collapses to his rear. Blood runs down his face and chest. Unable to unlock the power of his full Sicarii strength, locked within his new human host, Hui is ravaged by Jake mercilessly. He curses his misfortune, trying desperately to figure out how to draw out his full power before he's killed. You are not as strong as you think you are, Hui coughs, spitting out a mouthful of blood onto the street. I am barely at even a fraction of my power.
Were I at full strength, you would not even be able to lay a finger on me.
Again, Jake screams, and his voice ripples the dimensional fabric of the space around him. Briefly, Hui catches sight of the wastes of the astral world beyond, the countless horrors drawn to the teen's dark energy. Again, Jake's skin catches fire, but he's not burned. The flames flicker across his body, strobing in rhythm with the pulses of red and black energy. With a final shockwave, Jake's energy again flares outward. The streets and buildings all around them in a circle are swallowed into a massive sinkhole. Hui leaps into the air to evade the collapse.
What the hell is this kid? He cannot be human.
Jake suddenly materializes behind Hui as he is still in the air, grabbing him by the back of the neck and pivoting, throwing him down through the earth several hundred feet. Hui crawls from the rubble covered in blood and his right arm now broken.
Yamura, what have you become? This is not your power.
Jake ignores the Sakari, instead launching forward faster than lightning and driving a fist into his gut. Hui vomits blood, feeling his organs smash up against each other, and several bones breaking apart into dust. With a forceful backhand, Jake plants the Grand General face first into the ground. The teen's heel stomps down on the center of Hui's back, driving an agonizing shriek from the Sakari's lungs. Reaching down, Jake pulls Hui up by the hair. Bits of broken rock cling to the young man's face amidst the bleeding cuts and scratches. Hui opens his mouth to speak, but Jake immediately slams his face back into the ground, sinking it in several inches. Hui manifests an orb of energy in his hand, but before he can do anything with it, Jake hits him with a clothesline across the neck. Hui loses concentration, and the energy vanishes instantly. The Sakari screams in pain as Jake slams his back down into the street, before kicking him in the ribs and sending him flying through the side of a half-collapsed building. Upon impact, the rest of the building falls down around the Sakari, burying him in the rubble.
He has to pay,
Jake growls, his voice frighteningly deep, like sounds coming from a feral animal.
He has to die.
From the rubble, Hui speeds at Jake with a punch to the face. Despite his injuries, the Sakari is still powerful, and far from defeated. Even in this body that he has not yet gotten used to, he's able to release a fraction of his power in order to stay in the fight. Jake snatches Hui's fist out of the air, causing the Sakari's eyes to widen in surprise. Jake charges up an orb of swirling black energy in his other hand and slams it into Hui's chest, sending him speeding across the city. The force of the attack causes Hui to be unable to move until something can break his momentum. This comes in the form of crashing into the side of a burning panel truck. The truck folds inward, pinning Hui within. As Hui struggles to break free, Jake focuses the flashes of red energy into a swirling mass. Sparks of red electricity dance from the energy as it grows in strength and size. Just as the teen releases the attack, a form appears between the two fighters and deflects the energy to vanish into the sky with a single backhand swipe.
Killing Hui like this is not in the cards for you today,
the rogue Yazata Cedrion says. The appearance of the Grigori enrages Jake even further. Growling, Jake charges at the Yazata, but Cedrion evades using Shunkon Ito teleportation.
I have already demonstrated to you that...
Cedrion is cut off by Jake, who has already reversed direction and reached his new position. The blow connects hard, taking the Yazata off his feet. Cedrion bounces off the street once before backflipping and skidding to a stop as he stabs his sword into the ground. It's been eons since anyone has harmed him, and he marvels at the strange sensation as he touches his busted lip. He's long since forgotten that he can bleed.
You've gotten much stronger.
Cedrion says, impressed by the teen's growth. The presence of Yamura has conditioned your body to become something greater than the two of you alone could ever achieve. Jake rushes again, but Cedrion uses Shunkonito to maneuver behind the teen and kick him in the back. Jake pivots, snapping a roundhouse kick to the Yazata's face. Cedrion blocks with his forearm, pushing Jake back several feet with a pulse of invisible energy. Do not misconstrue my compliments. You are still not my equal boy, Cedrion says, drawing his sword. My intentions are not to kill you, but I have all the time in the world to start my plans over with someone else. As unique as you are not irreplaceable. Eventually, there will be another human that fits all of the criteria I require. Maybe that one will be more cooperative. Jake screams, the black energy and red lightning flaring outwards. He runs at Cedrion, attacking with a ferocity that pushes the Yazata back on defense. Surprised by the teen's remarkable strength, Cedrion is forced to slash his sword horizontally to create distance between them. The shockwave from Cedrion's weapon sends Jake tumbling backwards helplessly. Continue growing, Cedrion says, using Shunkonito to teleport to Hui's side and put an arm around the injured Sakari. You will need that strength very soon. Cedrion uses Shunkonito again, this time to escape the city with Hui in tow. Jake leaps at the Yazata just as he vanishes and reaches out, swiping at the spot Cedrion just stood. Cedrion's eyes widen in surprise as his momentum is halted, and he's pulled backward. Jake holds onto the back of the Grigori's decorative armor, pulling Cedrion with such force that he's able to hurl the Yazata through a building. What? Cedrion shakes his head, unable to process what has just happened. What did he do? Cedrion looks down to realize he has lost hold of Hui. Damn it. I must have dropped him in the void between space and time. It will take me ages to recover him. I did not expect the boy to have grown so strong. Was it the death of that girl? Did this event somehow trigger so much growth in his abilities? I knew that humans were emotional, but I did not realize they could reach such heights so quickly with nothing more than a single trigger event. The Grigori looks up, seeing Jake speeding towards him. Cedrion leaps high into the air, expanding his energy wings to the sides to give him an extra boost of speed and power. Jake misses his target and pivots, instantly leaping up to match his foe. The boy should not have been able to reach this level of strength yet. He was not intended to be at even half of this strength before attempting the trials. I have grossly miscalculated his potential. We will not have this fight today, Jake Stewart. Use that fire that you feel inside you to grow even stronger. You have surprised me, and that is not easy to accomplish. Fighting you now, I fear, would only cause me to get carried away. You are far too important to my plans to risk harming. We will meet again soon, Jake. In an instant, Hui and Cedrion are now gone. Jake screams at the top of his lungs, his energy exploding outwards in an emotional meltdown. The teen desperately searches his surroundings, trying to sense Hui's Sakari energy. In the distance, he finally feels the faint flicker of something resembling the energy he seeks. Jake runs off in pursuit, hoping to find and finish off the Grand General.